A very, very good morning once again to you. We just had a bit of fun talking about J.K. Rowling and Emma Watson, and that's a battle, a war of words. There's certainly still an ongoing war of words going on between Tony Blair and most of his cabinet and Nigel Farage, and we will get to that in just a moment, because it is quite extraordinary how there's more mention of reform at the Labour Party conference, it seems to me, than there is at the Reform Party conference that we had recently. But I think an awful lot of eyes on what's going on in the Middle East, this war in Gaza, and Donald Trump and President Netanyahu announcing this 20-point plan. Back to the 21 points originally mentioned, that one point was this apology call to Qatar, which Netanyahu had already done at this point. Tony Blair having a role in this sort of post-Gaza protectorate board of peace headed by Donald Trump, in return for Hamas laying down their weapons, return of the hostages within 72 hours, a huge number, as always, 1,000 plus of people held in Israel, Palestinians held in Israel being released, a little bit of land going to a buffer zone, but basically IDF troops out in a short period, and having this sort of international body run and reconstruct Gaza. Gazans not forced to leave, that was what Trump had originally talked about, but if they do choose to leave, they will have a right of return. I can't see anything that's a downside for Hamas here, other than they lose the leverage of the hostages, and that they've been told they are ousted. But don't they have a route back, just by, let's face it, calling themselves something else and coming back and getting elected in years to come?
Well, quite. I mean, there's a sort of willful naivety built into this plan, which is that there's going to be this amnesty for Hamas fighters who just lay down their weapons, the idea that just by command that they should have no place in the kind of future of Gaza going forward doesn't mean that they're not going to try to assert that. That's one thing when you're dealing with these jihadist lunatics, is that there is a tendency to treat them as sort of honest brokers in the same way that any other group might have been previously. You
want this and I want that, let's come to a deal where we get most of it, but they're not. Because also, that's not how they think.
No, absolutely, and Hamas is a good example, because also Hamas are not really interested in a Palestinian state. They want Palestine to be the Palestinian wing of an Islamic caliphate. They are
the destruction of Israel, every Jew dead,
absolutely,
and then spreading the caliphate not just throughout Gaza and the West Bank, the whole of the Middle East, and by the way, Europe too.
Yeah, and as Andrew Fox was pointing out to you a short while ago, they are essentially just the Palestinian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a broader Islamist, terroristic ideology. These are people who do not just have a kind of set of demands, and if those are met, then they'll happily come round the table and chalk up the win. So maybe there's more to this that we're not quite appreciating yet, and also maybe there is a certain point where even jihadist lunatics' self-interest kicks in. They think, if we don't go along with this, we're just going to get, again, an even more off the reins response from the Israeli government. So who knows? But there is, whenever you're dealing with these Islamist groups, there is a tendency to not believe them when they say that they want to destroy Israel and the West.
That's their aim. And again, I think what's also very interesting is those people who say, people who marched every 2 weeks in the centre of London, and all those people who wave their Palestinian flags and berate me on the tube. Hi, love, thanks for chatting to me this morning. I'm a terrible person who should be ashamed for supporting Israel. Sweetheart, I'll never be ashamed supporting the only democratic state in the Middle East. Call me old-fashioned. But it is extraordinary how quiet those people are when they're being offered on a plate exactly what they say they want. Peace in Gaza, IDF troops out. Of course, they're quite happy to want the hostages. The hostages don't get much mention from them, but yes, hostages being returned. All these people who've been detained without trial in Israel, they'll be coming back too. By the way, that's what all wartime governments do. We did it, we would do it in the next war. That's how life works in wartime. But they're getting everything. They're getting everything that they say they want. Okay, not a democratic state. I mean, if you think you want a democratic state in Gaza or part of Palestine with Gaza and the West Bank, you are talking about the Hamas terrorists being in charge. No Israeli government of any political hue. You could put Jeremy Corbyn in charge of that one, and even he wouldn't agree to that. I mean, he'd like to. No. Even he would know he would be out of power straight away because Israel would no longer exist at that point. So it's not going to happen. But let's have another little listen to what was said at that press conference yesterday, because as always, Donald Trump, who would be the chair of basically this board of peace, he doesn't like to underplay these things. So this is what he had to say.
This is a big day, a beautiful day, potentially one of the great days ever in civilization. And most importantly, we discussed how to end the war in Gaza, but it's just a part of the bigger picture, which is peace in the Middle East. And let's call it eternal peace in the Middle East.
I mean, why not just add in eternal along with this big day and with the greatest days ever in civilization? President Netanyahu, standing next to him, was a little bit more dealing with facts, is what he had to say.
I support your plan to end the war in Gaza, which achieves our war aims. It will bring back to Israel all our hostages, dismantle Hamas's military capabilities, end its political rule, and ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel.
Now, would it ensure if Hamas agreed to it that Gaza would never again pose a threat to Israel? Because we're talking about this sort of protectorate, this sort of technocrat government for a period of time.
Yeah.
And then they're talking about reform within the Palestinian Authority, currently run by Fatah, but actually mass support now, according to polling in the West Bank, is that actually Hamas would win any election. Can they guarantee that Gaza would never again pose a threat to Israel based on these 20 points as we've read them?
Almost certainly not. I mean, it's how you go forward from here, because as you say, the unfortunate truth in all of this is that whilst this technocratic setup where it's kind of going to be presided over by Palestinians, but also kind of external experts, Tony Blair lurking in the background as he always tends to, that's a concession and an admission of the fact that if you did have an election in Gaza tomorrow, you're very likely to have a Hamas landslide, even absent the repression that they're meting out. Obviously, the Palestinian Authority are being talked up as the Palestinians that we can do business with, and yet the reason that Mahmoud Abbas is 20 years into a 5-year term now is because he knows that he would be turfed out in favour of Hamas or something.
And bearing
like
in mind,
it.
Again, people often talk about the moderate Palestinians. If he's moderate, I mean, seriously.
No, I mean, he literally has a PhD in Holocaust denial, and they obviously continue to pay the families of terrorists who have murdered Israelis.
Not like under the table, not under the counter. It's over
open secret.
I think she got ministry that did it.
Absolutely, open secret is over sugary. So it's one of those things where that just needs to be recognised. And it's the sort of thing where there's the Hamas question: how do you deal with them immediately? How do you make sure that they do down arms, that they are not a military threat, even if they might continue to be a kind of ideological presence, if you like. The broader question is, when are we going to see, or how might we see, the sufficient kind of sea change within Palestinian politics, civil society, a new layer of leadership emerge which says, you know what, this holy war with Israel nonsense is, if nothing else, going to lead to just more death and destruction on our side. We need a new path. In the absence of that, it's not obvious.
No, and it's very interesting that Arab leaders from the Middle East, whether it's Saudis, whether it's UAE, whether it's like Qatar and Egypt, they're on board. They're on board with this. So we shall see. I want to hear from you on this. Well, always get in touch on any of the topics we're talking about. But what do you make of this plan for eternal peace in the Middle East involving Tony Blair? And we were joking earlier about, given his role in the Iraq War, which so many people are still so angry about. Whether he was credible as a figure there, but actually he is considered a power broker, he is considered a player, and of course he was, the sort of, was it not the EU's, but like the Gang of Four. It was like the Big Four's emissary on peace in the Middle East. He knows his stuff, that's for sure. But what's your reaction? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate, text cost £1, standard network rate message. Let's also talk about the Prime Minister here, Keir Starmer. I don't think we are talking about a big, beautiful day, and I don't think we are talking about eternal peace. It will feel eternal when he's speaking. He's going to do a speech. Can I see one more bit of video footage or photograph of him with his wife? His wife's apparently got this job in the NHS. Do you know what? You know what the NHS is really doing? What they really need is people to be at work doing their job. I mean, she does something to do with occupational therapy. I'm not entirely sure what that actually involves. I think that involves more paperwork than actually seeing patients in any way. But why are you taking your week off? I don't understand this bring your wife to work thing. I don't get it. I don't understand why politicians need to do that. But she's there all week. It's not like she's just turning up, for just sort of one photo call to come and kiss him and go, oh, I love you on the stage when he finishes today. I mean, it's just, can we just grow up as a country and not do this? It's ridiculous. But anyway, get that out of my system. He's going to do this speech. He's going to be talking about this virtual hospital service. I mean, whoopity-doo-dah. Sensible, good idea, all in favour. But take 2 years. And we'll talk about that in more detail in the next 20 minutes or so. But he's also going to tell basically, those on the left in the Labour Party, we're going to have to get tough on migrants and on welfare spending. And, we're just going to have to, we're going to have also get touched on all this. He goes, the decisions that are not cost-free or easy, decisions that will not always be comfortable for our party. That's an important message. The key thing is, can anyone really believe him, given that he's already backed down twice on 2 welfare issues? He's not done anything really to tackle both. His policy on illegal migration totally failed. Legal migration, Shabana Mahmood, his Home Secretary, is just doing a sort of a bit part version of what Nigel Farage announced a couple of weeks ago, but after saying that his policy is racist.
And also, I think people just don't trust them to deliver on this. They could be making the right noises, which they are trying to do at the very least, but it's partly a credibility problem because, as you say, whether it's the small boats, they're trumpeting this one in, one out plan, which isn't even really one in, one out. That's a lot harder to land.
We've got 6 out.
Just about, yeah. Maybe it's a few more crept back. Who knows? It's one of those things where they just don't have any credibility because they have 50,000 come across the border during their short time in power so far. And also, the reason people are particularly distrustful of this is if someone is to genuinely get a handle on whether it's legal migration, mass legal migration, it's going to take a tremendous amount of political will. You've not only got to deal with the human rights issue on the illegal migration side, on the legal migration side, you've got to basically rewire an entire economy which has been hooked on cheap imported labour. And there's whole sections of the public sector which are overly reliant on it. There's big questions there that need to be addressed. Do people really think that the party who are addressing this because they've been forced to, who are addressing this because Morgan McSweeney's focus groups have instructed them that it's necessary to stay in power, no one believes they will be able to grasp those nettles. And so therefore, even if the government was more popular, had more of a hearing in the country, we know that's not the case. Keir Starmer is the most disliked Prime Minister since records began.
I mean, just not even 15 months in. I mean,
what
that's
an achievement.
I know, well played. But that's the thing, there's no will to do this, to tackle any of these things. I mean, whether it's welfare, whether it's immigration, legal or illegal, or any of that. There's no will to do any of that. But there's also no belief that there is a way as well, because the abject lack of competence in every area. I consider their inability to even competently do their own PR to be shocking. I mean, I genuinely, keep going, the chief of staff, they had a director of strategy who were forced to resign last week. I think the biggest surprise that there was a director of strategy.
No, exactly.
And they obviously were working from home an awful lot and probably taking sick days for anxiety. I mean, I've covered a lot of governments over my years. I've been around far too long. And I have never known. I mean, John Major's government looks like, the peak of perfection and ability compared to this lot. They're an absolute shower. I mean, it's really quite shocking. So the idea that if you can't even manage a bit of basic PR, right? How on earth are you going to manage to turn around the country and all the problems it's got? And if you've already shown that you are completely and utterly beholden to your backbenchers, whether it's about recognising a Palestinian state, whether it's about backing down on winter fuel payments, well, that was the right move to back down on, but then backing down on, they're likely to back down on the 2-child benefit cap, which would be insane. They've already backed down on the most pathetic, weaselly, pointless £5 billion of their welfare reforms. They yapped on this week. We've had this nonsense about how they're going to take on youth unemployment. 1 in 8 young people doing absolutely sod all day. Absolutely outrageous, and actually it's probably more than that realistically. And is growing. And it turns out actually this big policy to get these people back to work, well, it won't include the kids who claim they've got anxiety. I mean, so you're not going to tackle the problem then. I mean, they're just. I mean, Keir Starmer is an empty vessel. We know that.
And he's in a particular bind because the things that he would need to do to both put the country back on the right track, and also to get on the right side of voters would mean that he can no longer be leader of the Labour Party. So it's one of those things where doing what is both right and democratically supported is something which is flatly rejected
Going to get him out.
by
But isn't that
Labour
the problem with the supposed threat from Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, who seems to sort of be backtracking? A lot of people said he might have gone too early. but he's basically saying the solution is borrowing a load more money, 40 billion to build council house, and going far to the left, renationalise everything, although that's quite a popular policy in the centre ground as well. But basically spend more, and basically move to the left, tax the rich more, because they'll all sod off, you get less tax in, you have to tax everyone else more. His offering is very much to the left of what Keir Starmer is currently offering. And they think that's the solution. In fact, the country is to the right of where Keir Starmer is. And he doesn't get it. I mean, he thinks they're far right. They're not. The country, you, me, people, we're centrists. We're centrists in this country now. The view that, we should deport people who haven't got a right to be here, and we shouldn't be paying, billions to people who are perfectly able to work, to not work the whole of their lives, put people in prison who commit crimes. I mean, none of this stuff is contentious among normal people. No,
absolutely. And the way in which Labour carry on, they seem to think that essentially the readership of the Guardian newspaper is reflective of the country. They continue to go down that road.
Because they're the only people they know.
And it's that thing where, obviously, they look at the focus groups, they're told where public opinion is on certain issues, they are aware of this, but I think they just still struggle to properly digest it. They're still, that's the Andy Burnham versus Keir Starmer thing was such an internal discussion. This would make a bit more sense if Labour were out of power, in opposition, having a kind of navel-gazing. You're running the country, there's all these issues going on, and yet you're kind of basically just having arguments that only really make sense or would appeal to someone on the soft left of the Labour Party. It just feels so delusional.
I think the problem is they've been out of power so long. They're protest groups like the Liberal Democrats. Are you a Tuesday night book club, or are you a party of power? You have to be serious. And that is one of the issues I think Reform is going to face as well. There's a lot of trying to be all things to all men on a lot of issues, and actually they're going to have to get more serious as we get close to the point where they could actually be in power. That's going to be a big issue. So much to talk about. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Do get in touch at 0344 499 1000. Also to be talked to in the last half hour about J.K. Rowling taking on Emma Watson finally. I mean, but just with such class. Some of us weren't multimillionaires at the age of 14 and actually understand what real women's lives are like. Fair point, love.